From the writings, we now turn to the founders, the flesh and blood founders, and ask them the next 7 questions. The first one, what is the highest claim you make for yourself? You see, if a person is really keen and earnest about getting to a place and he's not very sure how to get there, then he will ask for the best advice. If he wants to reach the highest state in, say, a game or a sport, then he will get the best coach. I was keen. I was interested. In fact, I was going to hang my eternal destiny on one of these founders. And so I had to ask, who are you? In other words, what is the highest claim you make for yourself? And these are the answers I found. The highest claim from the Hindus. Now, Visvamitra is not a founder. He is one of the authors. But the highest claim that these authors made for themselves was that of a sage. Who is a sage? A sage is a person who is very highly revered in society. Up there. Good poise, personality. He loves to counsel. His life is one of deep piety. And also, he has an excellent knowledge of the scriptures, the sacred scriptures of that community. That is a sage. Buddhism, Gautama Buddha said he was the enlightened one. After searching for 6 years at the age of 35, he claimed that one night in 4 stages, he became enlightened, fully enlightened. And so his claim, the enlightened one. Islam, Muhammad said that he was the seal of the prophets. A seal, final one. Nobody can controvert his words. Islamic tradition has it that Allah sent down 124,000 prophets. About 24 or 25 of them are mentioned by name in the Quran. Beginning from Adam and then Noah, Abraham, the patriarchs, and Jesus also is there, John. But Muhammad was the seal of the prophets, the final one, and the one who would wrap up all the revelations that Allah would send. Judaism, Moses considered himself to be the prophet of God, and people called him the lawgiver of Israel. That was the highest claim he made for himself, also sometimes known as the friend of God. When it came to Jesus, he claimed to be the Son of God. Now, I had asked, what is the highest claim you make for yourself? And I had decided that I would not controvert any of their claims. I would not challenge them. Just ask, get the response, and put it on the table. And here it was. And if you look at the list on the screen, you will have to agree that the line has to be drawn between the 4th and the 5th. The first 4 are all human. The final one, the claims of Jesus, is that of being a God, the Son of God. Wow! That's difficult to believe. For if you looked at him, he dressed like anybody else in the village, ate like anybody else, went to work in the little carpenter shop. Maybe at the end of the day, he just barely had enough to eat. How would he be the Son of God? So, when you look at just the claims, the tendency would be to take this claim and just toss it out. And I might have done it, except for one reason. If this writing was mythological, or if it was legendary, in which the story changed from an ordinary person to that of a superhuman, then I would have tossed it out. But no, the New Testament is the best attested ancient piece of historical literature. I would have to give a historical reason to throw it out. I could not find one there. And so I had to leave it, but it was still difficult to just swallow. So I looked at it this way. If he was only a human, then let me see if he falls into the category of other humans who call themselves God. And there have been people who call themselves God. Let's look at some of them. Those who are mad, deluded. It's called delusions of grandeur. You think you are so high, somebody who you really are not. A liar, imposter. Well, if he is a liar, then we will have to classify him as an incorrigible, pathological liar. Egomaniac or megalomaniac. Yes, people have called themselves from that position. You know, the pharaohs of Egypt called themselves gods. Some of the Caesars of Rome called themselves God. But they were in a position in which they could command that the people accept them as gods. The fourth option, truly God. Well, let's look at these four. Was he mad, deluded? What did some great thinkers say about him? The quote that I'm going to put on the screen is not really considered among the circles of the scholars as somebody great, but he was great. Not so much as a scholar, but as a great general. He was a world emperor, Napoleon Bonaparte. In his exile years, his friends came to him and said, why don't you look at the life of Jesus and consider it in detail? Well, at first it was not acceptable to him because he was a world emperor. What was he going to do just looking at a bitty little barefoot itinerant preacher from Galilee 1800 years earlier? But then they prevailed upon him and he did do a study. He went into it in some detail. And this is what he said at the end of his study. Everything in Christ astonishes me. The nearer I approach, the more carefully I examine. Everything is above me. Everything remains grand, of a grandeur which overpowers. Neither history, nor humanity, nor the ages, nor nature offer me anything with which I am able to compare it or even to explain it. Here, everything is extraordinary. Why did he say that? One of the reasons was because of his own confession that he had built his world empire on force, coercion, bloodshed, the sword, military genius. But this man, without wielding one sword, he had built up an empire that had lasted 1800 years up to his time. And this is what got him. He said, this man's empire consists of people who are willing today to die for him. Nobody is willing to die for me. There must be something absolutely unique in this kingdom that this man had built. That's why these words are on the screen. How about the words of Bernard Ram about the words of Jesus? They are read more, quoted more, loved more, believed more, translated more, because they are the greatest words ever spoken. And where is their greatness? Their greatness lies in the pure, lucid spirituality, in dealing clearly, definitively, and authoritatively with the greatest problems that throb in the human breast. In short, I did not find one serious scholar who would ever call Jesus mad. How about whether he was a liar or an impostor? It is not likely, really, because at the Sanhedrin trial, when he was being tried for his life, they asked the same question that I was asking 2,000 years later. Are you the Son of God? Same question I had. Jesus was a thoroughbred Jew. He was a rabbi, and a rabbi knew the entire Torah, from the first word of Genesis to the last word of Deuteronomy. He knew that in the Torah, if anyone confesses or states or claims that he was God, that would be blasphemy and it would be punishable by death. So here he was on a trial for his life. And the question was, are you the Son of God? If he answered yes, he would go to his death. Now, if you are on your trial for your life, and if everything seems to be going against you, but you did have some truthful evidence which you could bring to the table and present before the court and say, look, I am innocent, wouldn't you bring it? Of course you would. Now, if you knew that the judge was going to pass the death sentence and he would be correct, but your attorney came to you, your lawyer came to you and said, you are a goner, you are finished. The judge is going to pass the death sentence on you. But when I cross-examine you, I want you to tell true lies, untruths, falsehood, at point here and a point there, and leave the rest to me. I will save you from the death sentence. What will you do? I think I would be tempted to go along with him. You see, if you're in a right mind, you would bring truthful evidence to escape the death sentence. You would also be severely tempted to bring false evidence to escape the death sentence. Nobody in his right mind will bring false evidence to bring on the death sentence. This man looked at the Sanhedrin and he agreed to being the Son of God. It is difficult for a fair inquirer, and I'm hoping I'm a fair inquirer, to accept that this man is a liar. A liar is a person who knows the truth and says something else. I don't know whether he is the Son of God yet. But this much I know, that in his heart, deep in his heart, he was fully, completely, totally convinced that he was the Son of God, because he spoke those words and went to his death for them. I could not call him a liar. How about an egomaniac, a megalomaniac? Most of them sit at a position of authority and from there pronounce themselves as gods, like the pharaohs of Egypt and the Caesars of Rome. Did this man have any such authority and position? None at all. In fact, I come from India. I was born there. When you travel from one village to another, usually bare feet, by the time you reach your relative's home, you're tired. Your legs are exhausted, burning. You know what they do when you reach their door? They bring a pot of water and wash your feet. I tell you, it is cooling. It's very refreshing. But who does it? It's the lower members of the household. If you have servants, it is a servant who brings the pot of water and washes your feet. If you have two sets of servants, one who works in your kitchen and the other who works in the garden with the dirt out there, then it is the one who works out there in the garden that who comes now with a pot of water. In other words, it is the lower ones who go to wash. One day, Jesus and his disciples went to a home. And there was no servant, no slave to wash anybody's feet. So the disciples looked at each other. Who is going to do that? Only servants and slaves do that. So they sat still. Jesus looked at them, realized what was happening, stood up, took off his outer garment, wrapped his waist in a towel, and washed the dirty feet of his disciples. This is not the picture of somebody bloated with a sense of self-importance. This is just self-abnegation. This is not a person who wants to sit on a throne and you polish his shoes. He comes down and polishes his disciples' shoes, as it were, washes their feet. And then he turns to them and says, you also must do this. This is not a picture of an egomaniac. I really could not call him an egomaniac. Then, truly God? Boy, difficult. But remember, I was an inquirer. I had asked the question, and actually I had received an answer. Because when you look at the five, his was the highest claim. But I was struggling. And so I said, all right, let me give him the highest that I as a human can give. At a human level, the highest. So he would be a great prophet and a great moral teacher, but not God. Until I read this statement from C.S. Lewis, who said these words, "I am trying here to prevent anyone saying the really foolish thing that people often say about him, that is Jesus. I'm ready to accept Jesus as a great moral teacher, but I don't accept his claim to be God. That is the one thing we must not say. A man who was merely a man and said the sort of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would be either a lunatic on a level with a man who says he is a poached egg, or else he would be the devil of hell. You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman or something worse. You can shut him up for a fool, you can spit at him and kill him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But let us not come up with any patronizing nonsense about his being a great human teacher. He has not left that open to us. He did not intend to." Wow. That pulled the rug from off my discussion under my feet. I thought of giving him a high position among humans, but no, here it is. If an ordinary person in his right mind calls himself God, then you have only two options. Show that he is not and let him go, or recognize that he is and fall at his feet. It is difficult to make any other option when a person with a clear thinking mind has claimed to be God. There's one more option that Richard Dawkins in his book The God Delusion says, and that is that he was maybe honestly mistaken. Honestly mistaken that he was God. Really? Let me check that out. If you, ladies, let me ask you a simple question. Could you be honestly mistaken, just honestly mistaken, that you're the Queen of England? No. How about you guys? Just honestly mistaken that what you came in here was not your car, but it was a spaceship that brought you from Mars. What am I saying? I am saying that, in ordinary things you can be honestly mistaken. Where did you leave the keys? Honestly mistaken. Maybe a face in the crowd, honestly mistaken. But you cannot be honestly mistaken about huge, major things that envelop your whole life. So he could not have been honestly mistaken. In fact, is such an intellect, clear as a sky, bracing as the mountain air, sharp and penetrating as a sword, thoroughly healthy and vigorous, always ready and always self-possessed, liable to a radical and most serious delusion concerning his own character and mission? Preposterous imagination. And so we are left with a place. Difficult to believe. At the same time, that is the highest claim of all the five. I had to leave it as a claim. The next question I had consisted of looking at the message and mission of the founders. Now, this is big. The question is huge. What I did was just put their message and mission into a few short sentences and looked to see what would happen. So here it is. In Hinduism, the authors, their message and mission was to show the way to ultimate truth, which would be merging of the human Atma or soul into the super soul or Brahman. The path, the way to the truth to get yourself to the destination. Buddhism, Gautama Buddha said, "For enlightenment I was born, for the good of all that lives." I was enlightened. And I will teach you how to get enlightened. The 4 golden rules and the 8 right circumstances. I was enlightened fully, and I'll teach you how to do that. That is my message and my mission. How about Islam? For Muslims, the Quran is the infallible word of God, revealed to the Prophet Muhammad by the angel Gabriel. So Muhammad's message and mission was to bring the word of Allah, to the human race. Judaism, Yahweh said these words, "You, through Moses, to the children of Israel, you shall keep my statutes and my judgments, which if a man does, he shall live." So what was Moses' message and mission? I will bring to you the commandments and the statutes and the testimonies of God, Yahweh. You break that, you die. You keep that, you live. That was his mission. When it came to Jesus, he used the most peculiar words. He said, "I am." No other founder used those words in such a distinct way to say, "I am," for example, the way, the truth, and the life. If the Hindu master and those authors said, "I will teach you the way, the truth, and the life," Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." When Gautama Buddha said, "I was enlightened and I will teach you how to get enlightened," he said, "I am the light that enlightens. I am the source." Wow, I am. When Muhammad said, "I will bring you the word of Allah," this man said, "I am the word that became flesh. I am that word." When Moses said, "If you do this, you shall live, you shall have life," this man said, "I am the resurrection and the life." Unusual words. No other founder ever claimed to be identical with his message. Every other founder brought the tenets of belief, brought the doctrines, brought the philosophies, and taught them. This man brought himself. He was the message. He was not bringing a message. That was only a part of it. He was the message. Absolutely unusual words. So once again, when you look at the question, he sets himself apart with using the words, "I am the message." The only founder who claimed to be identical with his message. There's no difference between him and the message. You know, if you take away the Hindu authors from their writings, you would still have Hinduism. If you take away Muhammad, you would take away just the hadith, the ahadith, the traditional writings. You would not be able to take away the Quran, the words of Allah, and Islam would still remain. If you take away Gautama Buddha, Buddhism would still remain because it's there in the Hinayana and Mahayana writings. If you take away Jesus, nothing is left in Christianity. Nothing, because he is the message. Now, one other way to look at it would be to compare, and I'm going to compare him two of these founders. First with Gautama Buddha. At the age of 29, he left home to look for light. 6 years spent in a relentless search for light. Beat himself, starved himself. Sometimes he would take one morsel a day, sometimes one morsel a week. There was one description in which he said, "I took 1 or 2 grains of rice in 2 weeks." He stood for long periods of time, never sat down. He would sit still and never stand up or walk. Lie on a bed of nails, pull out the hair of his beard and the hair of his head. Relentless search. And finally, after 6 years, he said, "I was enlightened." Let us take that as the truth of his claim, because we said we're not going to controvert their claims. Let us take him as stating the truth of his matter. Compare that with Jesus. He didn't beat himself. He didn't go looking for light. He didn't pull out the hair of his beard and the hair of his head or starve himself, lie on a bed of nails. No, he simply stood and said, "I am the light. I am the source of light." He was one who claimed to be identical with his message. How about with Muhammad? Muhammad, one night was taken from Mecca And this is called the Isra, the night journey. In fact, this is a very sacred description of Muhammad. When it was over and he told the people about it, they said, this is a unique experience. He was sleeping in Mecca. When the angel Gabriel came and woke him up and said, we need to go to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. That's a long ways away. But there was a heavenly horse right there, Buruk, and they both climbed onto Buruk and flew over from Mecca to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. There, when they landed on the Temple Mount, was a ladder reaching up from 1, 2nd, 3rd, 4th to the 7th heaven. Allah created 7 heavens. And He Himself resided in the 7th heaven. And here was this ladder. Angel Gabriel took Muhammad and said, let's climb the ladder. And so they went to the 1st, 2nd, and they went on climbing. Each heaven was supervised by one of the great prophets. There was Adam, there was Jesus, there was John, and all the others. But Muhammad went up to the 7th heaven. 7th heaven in proximity to Allah. That is where he went. And then he came down that same night. When he told the people, they said, boy, this is amazing. Absolutely unique. And this is one of the reasons why Muhammad is called the seal of prophets. He went up to the proximity of Allah, the level of the heaven where Allah dwells. All right, let's accept this also as a truthful claim that he did go up to heaven and come down. Let's compare that with Jesus. In Muhammad's story, there is actually an inherent confession. And the confession is this, that he was a person on this earth, belonged to this earth, and he went to the 7th heaven for a visit and then came down that same night. Compare that with the claims of Jesus, where Muhammad went for a visit was his home. He belonged there, and he came down here for a visit. The origins and the direction of travel is exactly the opposite. That's not all. Really, looking at it, you tell me, who would know more about a place? Let's say Manhattan in New York, busy, where people just move in and out. Who would know more about shopping, say, in Manhattan? A person who lives there, or a person like me who might have come from India on a flight and gone to New York and gotten one of those buses, they take you around the city, and few hours I spent looking at the city of New York and then took the next flight home. Who would know more about New York? The one who lives there, right? Who would know more about that 7th heaven? The one who lives there. Who would know more about where final, ultimate truth dwells? There. His claim was that he came from there and he was the message he brought to us. Really amazing claim.